All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Elections Weekly. We're a little bit late here, so apologies for that, but we did have some scheduling conflicts internally. So, um, we're happy to be back here regardless, going over today's election results, or not today's, we're going over the election news for the last week. Pretty much this entire episode is going to be focused on the stuff we've been seeing this week, the election results in that primary out of New York and Florida, and the special election results in New York, as well as our Senate, as well as our updated ratings, which we announced yesterday on our website and on our social media platforms. If you probably noticed, as you did, given the typical amount of attention these election rating overviews get. So let's get right into it. New York special elections did not go the way most people expected. We didn't have an official rating for this. We would have probably rated it as leans or likely Molinaro. It turns out Pat Ryan narrowly won the race by about 3 percentage points, similar to Biden's performance, but actually a little bit better than him in this new district, or in this old district. Ryan will be up as the incumbent in, I believe, the 18th district, or the 19th district, and Molinaro is still running in the 18th. So this doesn't affect that matchup at all. But what it does do is it gives Democrats a little bit of a glimmer of hope before the rest of the year. This is our last real special election. This is our last real primary night, aside from upcoming primaries in, I believe, New Hampshire and Rhode Island, which are not, three states which tend to be Democratic or not as competitive on balance as these. This is our last competitive and interesting state night. So first, let's go into the ones that were not extremely interesting, and I'll go ahead and for those who are watching our live stream here, go into Florida first because Florida was uninteresting. Charlie Crist, of course, won the race by a considerable margin. He won basically everywhere except for Gainesville, which is a liberal college town, and then a couple of panhandle counties where many of the Democratic voters aren't really Democrats anymore. This is a big egg on the face for UNF polling, which for some reason had Nikki Fried up by 4. Turns out she lost by 24. That is a 28-point margin of error right there. One of the more impressive ones I've seen in recent memory.
That's McLaughlin, Virginia 7th.
Pretty much all the other primaries won as expected. Laura Loomer lost her bid to Dan Webster, albeit narrowly. Maxwell Frost won that contested primary in the Orlando-based district. No other interesting primary results of note. And we did make one change. We moved Florida 4 to safe Republican from likely. I believe this has to do with candidate quality in that district. Obviously, the Republican side, Ron DeSantis was unchallenged. Marco Rubio was unchallenged, but even with basically no Republicans on the ballot at the top level, Republicans did outvote Democrats by a considerable margin in this primary. We have both the Senate and gubernatorial race as likely Republican. Honestly, I think the gubernatorial race leans more towards safe Republican at this point, but this is Florida. We're not going to be having a race in Florida at safe unless there's really, really good evidence. But neither of these two candidates at the top of the ballot here seem to be much difficulty at all.
Yeah, I mean, I would heavily lobby for safe.
Yeah,
I mean,
again, we want to get some more polling, but the polling is around the realm of, I believe, 8 to 10 points up ahead of Crist right now on average, which is, yeah.
If I were Democrats, I would be more hopeful about Ohio than I would be about Florida.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's a very reasonable chance that that Ohio is closer than Florida is, which is really, really crazy. And that may just be because because DeSantis and Rubio win by 10 and Vance wins by 8. That could easily be the case, but even if that's the case, that's still somewhat surprising given both of these states' leans in recent memory.
I mean, plus now we'll go on to some underperformance.
Yeah, 8 would be an underperformance. Yeah, it would be on par with what Trump did, but given the lean of a year, that'd be really, really embarrassing for Vance. We'll go on to some of the competitive primaries now. Daniel Goldman narrowly beating Yulee New for that 10th District Democratic primary. New is potentially going to be running on the Working Families Party line. She has their nomination. It's kind of up to her whether she wants to actually.
Did she? She actually doesn't have the nomination for the general
election. Oh, really? She doesn't. Interesting.
Because of a weird quirk, Mondaire Jones has the line for the general, but
interesting.
It's expected that Jones is going to cede the line and that the party would nominate Yulee.
Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, this is a Biden plus 60 district. There's only one Republican leaning area here. That's a small sliver of Borough Park that is in the seat. That portion almost certainly delivered Goldman over the line. If that portion was not in the district, you would have almost certainly seen Yulee New as the nominee.
Yeah,
given the
yeah. Sorry. No, I think the Working Families Party line would actually have not a reasonable chance, but I could see her pulling in 35% of the vote,
Mhm. Yeah,
maybe
totally
even more.
possible. And again, this is a seat Republicans might be lucky to get 15 or 20. So that could be substantial. That could be like, 55,
Mm.
35, 20, or 10. That would not be impossible to see. Although I think if that is the case, you would see the Orthodox community heavily lobbying their voters to vote for Goldman in the general, which
Mhm.
would be that would take votes from Republicans almost certainly. I know Goldman had support in the primary, but obviously he is much more liberal than much of the Orthodox community at this point, even if he is probably going to be one of the more moderate members of the New York delegation.
He'll almost certainly join the New Democrats.
Mm-hmm. And in a more embarrassing showing for Carolyn Maloney, she managed to only get 24% of the vote in a district that included the
Oh,
Upper East Side, Upper West Side. She almost got outvoted by Suraj Patel of all people, which is just utterly embarrassing. Jerry Nadler
that's
got
beautiful.
55% of the vote here. Yeah,
That's
55% of the vote
beautiful.
here. Yeah, really impressive showing for Jerry Nadler. Clearly the anti-panda messaging did not work. Um, Carolyn
Neither
Maloney
did the
became increasingly
senility message.
yeah. Carolyn Maloney became increasingly deranged in recent weeks, making bizarre statements about Jerry Nadler. This campaign clearly was floundering, and I'm shocked by the margin, but I'm not shocked that Nadler won by a wide margin. Another interesting one, New York 17. Sean Maloney wins this one by a 2-1 margin. Alexandria Biaggi was supposed to be the nominee. Democrats wanted for a Long Island-based district. They drew the seat to specifically include a chunk of Westchester County to get her in. With the redrawn map and with Maloney going to Mondaire Jones's seat, Biaggi decided to primary Maloney and try and get him out. And this did not work, but it did. It is a pretty a reasonable showing for a late candidacy from progressive in the seat.
Yeah.
We would expect, Maloney's obviously by far I think this is a pretty Democratic seat, so we do expect Maloney to do pretty well here.
Oh,
But yeah,
so,
Biaggi did pretty respectable, I think.
yeah. So I actually, based on this result, I wonder, and I tend to think this is true. Um, Mondaire Jones could have beaten Maloney if he ran here. I think
It's
that's
very possible.
pretty. I think
Hmm.
that's pretty clear. I mean,
It's
Biaggi
very
got
possible.
33% of the vote.
It's very,
Uh,
very
sh-
possible, I would think.
she didn't have nearly the war chest that
Hmm.
Mondaire Jones had, nor the incumbency. So
Hmm.
that's kind of where I'm at. I think she would have won or he would have
Hmm.
won if he ran here.
Yeah, but that's a what if. Jones obviously ran in the New York 10 primary, managed to get an impressive third place. I don't think people expected. I think people were kind of underrating him and overrating Carlina Rivera. But it is interesting to see that the progressive vote here did substantially outvote Goldman, and Jones loses that seat, which he could have well held against Maloney if they had decided to hold that up. The big ones, though, the big surprising results here were New York 19, Ryan winning the seat by a small margin, bigger than Biden. Not quite the D+6 shift New York Times or 538 had implied. They used PVI to compare this. It really was a shorter shift, which should be still frightening for Republicans because on balance, that could mean if you use specials as a baseline, which you should not, that would indicate a slight Democratic shift. In reality, this probably more indicates a more neutral leaning environment, at least at the moment. Also concerning is the 23rd district here, owing to just a massive Democratic turnout in Tompkins County and at 85% of the vote going to the Democrats here. Republicans only held this by a 7-point margin, which is pretty embarrassing, again, on the whole. Uh, there's a lot of talk going around about why this happened, what's going on here, but I think it's pretty clear that situations have at minimum improved for Democrats since in the last few months. I don't think that's deniable at this point. You can beat
No.
around the bush all you want. There's a lot of justifications. Some of them reasonable. Could be very possible that it was because there was higher turnout for Democratic primaries. Could be very reasonable that new Republican voters don't vote as much in special elections as Democratic ones do. That's a valid hypothesis. But I think if we're going to need to see November before we can kind of make those sort of claims, because
But
right now the data trend lines are pretty clearly indicating Democrats are doing better than expected.
well, okay, the only reason I don't buy that argument about um the voters Democrats have now vote more in special elections is because every special election, or not every, but a lot of the special elections pre-Dobbs had Republican over performances,
Hmm. Yeah, quite
considerable
a few of them
Republican
did.
over. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I don't think I buy that argument
Yeah.
personally.
Again, it's a pretty tenuous. This is just what I'm seeing from people who are trying
Mhm.
to justify Republican underperformances here. I think a lot of that is genuine coping. I don't see it myself, but to each their own. If you want to believe that, then fine. But yeah, I don't think that's a valid hypothesis.
No.
One other interesting one I want to mention here is the 23rd district primary in the new 23rd district. What quickly became, of all things, a proxy war between the New York Republican Party and Elise Stefanik. Nick Langworthy narrowly beat Carl Palladino in this district. Palladino won by about a 2-1 margin in Erie County, his home county of Buffalo, but got walloped everywhere else in the district. Palladino has a notorious history of making bizarre and racist remarks. This would have been a very safe Republican district for him anyway. It's losing that Tompkins County portion. I'm pretty sure that's in the new 18th district right here, or the new 19th district. But it's pretty. That's a pretty embarrassing performance for Palladino, given Stefanik's endorsement, the heavy Trump world support for Palladino. Langworthy doing much better here, I think, is a good thing for Republicans, obviously, but it's an interesting thing to look at given how heavily Stefanik was lobbying for him over Nick Langworthy, the chairman of the New York Republican Party.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's always good to see Carl Palladino go down.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, as per usual, the guy's a perpetual loser. But those are just the interesting results. Now we'll go to our race ratings, then we'll kind of get into, probably for the rest of the episode, what our feelings are in this environment, what's going on, and how we see things shaping out for November. But before we get into our final discussion here, let's go ahead and show again for those who are watching our most recent ratings update. We moved a lot of races. We moved 24 races this week. And we now have our Republicans favored in 218 House districts. That's the absolute bare majority they would need for a majority in the House. Democrats favored in 193, and then an additional 24 as toss-ups. Even if Democrats win every single toss-up district right now, which will not happen, we don't think they win control of the House. But a smaller House majority for Republicans would be problematic and also be indicative of a more Democratic trending year. A lot of the changes we made here, you'll notice Democratic leans. We moved Alaska. We're still waiting for the embarrassingly long results to come in from Alaska. It's really a waiting game, and I have thoughts on Alaska, which I'll talk about later, perhaps. But again, we've got California 3, California 26. A lot of these suburban, urban Republican districts are moving. We also moved one Democratic gubernatorial race. We moved Colorado to safe Democratic. We've not shifted our Senate ratings, though. So that's kind of the rough look at that. So now we can kind of go into a little bit what we're thinking of here. So I know, Dylan, I'll give you some thoughts here. What is going on? What do you see the national environment as being at this point? And can this hold into November? Or is this perhaps a mirage, as we've seen in some previous elections many, many times before?
Well, so I think we are headed for a neutral year. I could see any result between R+2 and D+2 at this point. But I think we're headed into a mostly neutral year. I don't think it's a mirage, but I don't know that it can necessarily hold until November. I don't know. November is still very far away. And I think a lot of it is going to be race specific. Like Pat Ryan ran his campaign in New York 19 almost exclusively on abortion rights, and the message obviously worked. I think that much is clear. So if Democrats run on that message, maybe they do better. But Biden has had a lot of good indicators in his favor lately. I think it's undeniable that his approval rating is going up. The trend line is kind of clear. Gas prices are going down. It can only be good for him. And I don't think this is a mirage because unlike 2014, where the Democratic polling was good until the last couple of months, I think Kraz pointed this out. The special elections didn't have that same indication. So we're seeing neutral polling and special elections that would go towards that indication as well.
I wouldn't necessarily agree on the special elections part. I think we didn't have a lot of special elections from 2013 to 2014, but we did have a few. I think 2010 is an interesting one though, because that one was one where Republicans did have some worse luck in special elections. They lost a competitive seat in Pennsylvania. They lost a district in New York, upstate New York, thanks to a conservative Republican split, but they still had basically Republicans solidified around one nominee in upstate New York. Obviously, you had a big win. You had a big win there in Massachusetts, but I think I'm looking at the list here of special elections. You had South Carolina 1, which was not a competitive seat. You had Missouri 8, not a competitive seat. Louisiana 5th, not competitive. Massachusetts 5th, not competitive. Alabama 1st, not competitive. The 13th district, that was competitive-ish, I think, but that was a different district. Florida 19. South Carolina senator and then that was a special election in November. This is all of the special elections in total from 2013 to 2014. I don't think any single one of those would be considered a toss-up seat by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, no, but even
so
if you take
that's one difficulty I have there.
But even if you take the non-competitive special elections in 2018 or this year, they still show overperformance or underperformance.
They show an overperformance or an underperformance, but I think the thing that I'm kind of hedging my bets on here is that the polling on Biden is still horrific. It's still absolutely horrendous. Even if it's better, it's still worse than Trump at his worst in 2018. It's even being, I think the best one he's had is -9. That was a 53 to 40. Or sorry, that was a 53 to 44 from I think Gallup. Most of the others have still been in that 15 to 20 down category, but it's just not been him at 30%. Now it might be at 38% or 40%.
So in 2018,
that's comparable to Trump.
So let's look at this time in 2018. Trump was at about 41%. That's where Biden is right now. But the latest polling on Biden, Rasmussen had him at -4. It looks like.
I don't regard Rasmussen. I've never regarded Rasmussen as a credible pollster even before this. The last polls we've had since the 12th. The last ones we've had are -13, -18, -12, -10, -19, -13, -10, and -9. Rasmussen, that was the -10. I would get rid of that. Emerson was the best for him. That's a 42 to 51. There's definitely been an improvement. Again, the peak of the nadir for him was at 37% in July 20th. He's up to, on average, up about 5% from that, and then down from 57% disapproval to 54. So that's about an 8% shift on average. If you're going from 37 to 41, that's about 7 or 8%. So that's a substantial improvement. But I don't know. That's just one thing, though.
Yeah. And if that trend holds, if he improves even a few more points, if he can hit 44, 45% approval rating regularly, I think you gotta consider that territory for a neutral year where a lot of the Democratic incumbents survive.
I wouldn't consider 44 to 45% a neutral. I think even that, I think, historically we're talking you need to have +10. Again, we're hedging our bets here off of over performances. I do find the idea that Republican voters, rural voters, are not turning out in special elections to be interesting. That if there is an explanation for this that leads to a Republican midterm, a Republican more than a red ripple, that would be the most interesting. That would be the one I think we'd look back on and say, yes, Republican rural voters were not turning out in special elections, but they do turn out on general elections. That's the theory, right? The Republicans have basically traded high propensity suburban and urban voters for lower propensity rural and white working class voters.
Sure.
That is an interesting theory. I don't know if it's true.
Well,
That is kind of what I'm heading with. That's one of the reasons I'm hedging my bets on this, though.
so if we take that as true for a minute, just to play it out, why would they turn out in historically low turnout midterms too? I mean, midterms don't generally have very high turnout.
Again, I think you dealt with this issue in the past with some Democratic districts as well. It's been a bit of a problem. But what I would say more specifically is that we're also seeing a divorce between the statewide polling and district polling. House district polling is really bad, is not on balance very good for Democrats right now. That's yielding more towards what you would expect. So either the districts are off, the nationals are off, or there's something funky going on with special elections.
Well,
I really don't know.
The state and the national polling are saying one thing, and then the district polling is saying the opposite.
They're saying very, very different things. What I would say is I think we're in August right now. We've got September, we got October, we got 2 more months left, and then basically got 2.5 months until the election. A lot can change in 2.5 months. I am very skeptical of saying anything concrete for now as to whether or not things will change from here. What I will say is if the election were to happen right now, I would think that Democrats would probably be 50-50 in the Senate. I would think Republicans would take the House. They'd probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of 230-ish seats. 230, 235, but I really don't know. We're talking about right now, not in 2 months. A lot changes in that period of time.
Right now, I do think they take the House, but I also think Democrats might take the Senate right now.
It depends on I think Republicans are in a really good position in Nevada, which is the only states I think you could say right now would be Pennsylvania, maybe, if the polling is consistent with that. I don't think Ohio is happening, even despite my disdain of JD Vance on a personal political level. I don't think that's happening. And
JD Vance is doing everything he can to prove you wrong, though.
Oh, he's trying. He is trying. He is very much trying to. I mean, he's running an embarrassing campaign, but he's also running a campaign like that in a state where, again, if Democrats were to win that, they would need to overperform by 9 percentage points in a midterm. That has quite literally never happened.
It's a very tall order.
Yeah. Like when I say that does not happen, that does not happen. You do not see a party overperform in a state they lost by near double digits. That's in the ballparks of things that are not believable. I fully believe that it could be closer than expected, but
it's a very tall order. I think the closest it will get, I could see Tim Ryan hitting 47%.
I think 46 is more reasonable. Is it a 2-person race or is it?
I think it's a 2-person race.
Let me check.
If it's a 2-person race, 47.
There are two independent candidates on the ballot, but no libertarians, no Greens.
Okay, I could see like 44, 45% then. Vance hitting like 51, 52.
So, again, I think what we're talking about here is that essentially what would need to happen for Democrats to do something like this is to have a history-defining midterm, and I still don't think that's a very viable suggestion. I think that would be challenging at minimum. Yeah.
We're not there yet. We are not at a place where we can say that Democrats are going to buck midterm trends. We're not there yet.
We're just not. Just not.
If Biden keeps improving, if his approval rating hits 45, 46, 47%, then we can start having that conversation. Because then the amount that incumbents like Warnock and Kelly need to overperform by lessens significantly.
Ultimately, what we're dealing with here is still a president with fairly historically unpopular numbers for the time, an economy that's not great, and basically the best things he has going for him are a student loan thing. We still have no idea what the polling on that or what the impact on that is going to be. I have a feeling that's not going to skew very positive, but it's just a feeling. We really don't know. We just genuinely do not know.
I think the most they can hope for with the student debt relief isn't going to win them any independence. I think what it could do is bring Democrats home. and not in the sense that Democrats were going to vote for Republicans until Biden did the student debt. No, but in terms of Democrats who don't approve of Biden, I think it could bring
I think
that.
I would be more suspicious of that because I think a lot of it is Democrats right now. A lot of those Democrats that are disapproving him are Black or Hispanic, and I don't think student loan relief is going to be pushing the numbers on them too much. This
But
is more of a
18 to,
white upper income voter sort of
sure, but
proposal.
18 to 34-year-olds had very low approval numbers for Biden. I could see it
Yeah.
improving his numbers there quite a bit, actually.
Yeah. Again, it's all possible. We're dealing with what potentially would be. Again, we saw there were periods in 2014 where it looked like Republicans would be preparing to buck history. So we're dealing with stuff that would be
But-
fairly historically unprecedented. So I am skeptical of anything that goes against my gut, and my gut is just like this doesn't seem like something that's possible. But we'll see. I really don't know.
But what I'll also say, as somebody who anyone who listens to this show regularly knows, I am very critical of Democratic campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody very critical of Democratic campaigns, they're running a pretty solid one right now.
They're running pretty decent right now. I think that's I don't think that's arguable.
Like Biden's speech in Maryland last night. What is time anymore? Whenever he did that speech in Maryland, talking about what you're going to do if people vote for you. That's good. Do more of that.
Better to have a message.
Yes. Run on something. They have abortion. Yeah. They have student loans. They have all these things they want to do if they get more seats in the Senate. Good. Do that. That's how you're going to win.
I think, you would having a message would be ideal. Yeah, I would think anyone could agree that having a message of some type would probably be better than having no message whatsoever.
You would think, but Democrats historically don't agree with that. Democrats historically are just like, please vote for us.
Yeah, please vote for us. Yep.
We might do something. We might not. It's really hard. So, I mean, they're running on abortion. They're going to run on gay marriage. Good. More of that, please. And Republican Senate recruitment, I know you've been banging this drum, has been abysmal.
It's very not good. It's very, very bad.
Like Blake Masters, JD Vance, and Dr. Oz, not good. All bad candidates.
Masters in particular is just extremely not good.
And I will eat crow on Dr. Oz because I thought everyone was underrating his chances. No, it seems like everyone was rating them properly.
We still have that race as a toss-up, and I do think it's interesting that some polls have come out that are indicating in the realm of reason instead of the Fetterman plus 15, which was never a possibility.
No,
was never, ever a possibility.
No, Fetterman was never going to win this race by 15. I have my doubts about the Emerson and Trafalgar, the Emerson poll in particular showing Fetterman only up 4. I think Fetterman's probably up a little bit more than that, like 5, 6, 7, but not 15. 15's unreasonable.
Yeah. Again, we'll see. I am interested to see how things go from here, obviously, but that's just going to be a matter of time until we figure this all out. That's just the best way I can put it, is we really don't know what's going on. We're kind of going blind here in a lot of ways.
And Blake Masters, man, that pivot to the center was bad.
See, this bothers me. This bothers me. Is Arizona Republicans, Arizona conservatives, I should say, for decades have been complaining about how the McCain wing of the party was not conservative enough, and they were not delivering on promises, and that if you give them control, they're going to do a lot better. Well, all they have to accomplish in the last 6 years is getting mad at Martha McSally for pivoting to the center in the general election, getting mad at Martha McSally for doing that again in 2020, and then nominating this guy, Blake Masters, who thinks he can pivot to the center in 2022. Their best candidate, the guy that I thought it's just unbelievable how inept these people are at politics. Just truly unbelievable how bad these people, just they literally complain about this for 6 years. The entire Trump era complain about Republicans shifting too much to the center in the general. We got to really push the Trump message. And then the moment they get their nominee, what does he do? He pushes to the center. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm glad he's not running on election conspiracy fraud anymore. I'm glad he's kind of shifted his position on fetal personhood, because that's not going to fly in Arizona.
Yeah,
it boggles the mind. It boggles the mind how people could think this is a more believable shift than McSally, who had a moderate record in the House. How people could think this is actually believable. I had people telling me for the last 2 weeks, oh, well, Masters is running a better campaign now. He's running a good campaign even. I'm like, it's not a believable shift. It's just not. This is not in any universe a believable shift.
I mean, I obviously completely agree. I think it's funny watching you fume at that wing of the party, because it feels like I'm watching myself yelling at Democrats for being bad at politics. It feels exactly the same. They're not good at it. Blake Masters is not good at. You don't do such a blatant website change when your opponent has a war chest the size of Mark Kelly's.
Yeah, about the only thing Blake Masters did well is by making his website unarchivable in the Internet Archive. I will give him props for that. The problem, yeah, you still got screenshots because the internet is forever. And he's got interviews talking about fetal personhood, and now he's saying, well, fetal personhood, he doesn't mean fetal personhood at conception, which is like the actual definition of fetal personhood. He's saying like, no, fetal personhood in the third trimester. I'm like, I've never heard of that before, but okay, sure.
Yeah,
your website said you were 100% pro-life. You were in favor of repealing Griswold. You were in favor of all this nonsense, and now you're not. And like, anyone's supposed to believe this? Come on.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
And the more offensive thing here is that Peter Thiel has not spent any money on this race since the general. He foisted J.D. Vance and Blake Masters on the Republican Party and is not spending anything to defend them. Like, you want to be a kingmaker in the Republican Party? You better spend some money on your candidates.
I know. Isn't it great?
Hopefully, I wonder if he was the guy who was advising J.D. Vance to go on a tour of Israel, talking about birth rates while, of all things. I mean, just these people are so divorced from the actual reality of what they need to be campaigning on.
Yeah, see, J.D. Vance and Blake Masters could have done the Marco Rubio thing of being everything to everyone. But they decided to go all in on being, I don't even want to say populist, because it's not popular.
It's stupid. It's populist.
It's dumb. It's populist. You can't run on. You can't. JD Vance is running on banning porn and maybe not allowing maybe not allowing no fault divorce, which cool idea.
Don't forget, not supporting Ukraine, because we can't support Ukraine. That's a compelling Republican platform right there. I'll tell you that. People are jumping to the polls to vote for a repeal of no fault divorce.
Like, okay, if you wanted a perfect storm for an underperformance in Ohio, Tim Ryan being the candidate, good step one. A Republican who is literally not running a campaign, good step two. And a Democratic Party that's actually starting to do stuff, good step three. Do I think it's going to happen? No. Are the conditions right for it? We're getting there.
They'd have to straighten a circle for the next 2 months. And I still feel, again, that's really, really improbable. What I would say is that JD Vance, I think, clearly signed up to not have to campaign. He signed up for a race he thought would be easy, would require no campaigning whatsoever. He could just continuous talk radio tour, continuous tour of Israel, continuous tour with the populists talking about all this sort of nonsense. And it clearly has not turned out that way. And I don't know what he was expecting, because, you're running for office. You got to be ready to campaign. If you weren't ready to campaign, you shouldn't be running for office. It's kind of one of the things you got to do.
Yeah, you got to raise money. Which Blake Masters is starting to learn now that the Senate Leadership Fund has cut him off.
Mm-hmm. That's clearly a gambit to try and get Trump and Thiel to spend money. I will say that.
Yeah, that's a faulty bet.
I think it's better than nothing. I think, but yeah, it's just
is
these people don't know what they're doing. I would rather Mitch spend his money on races he needs to spend them on than try to spend money propping up Blake Masters when you got Peter Thiel, who wanted this guy in office, gave him a bunch of money in the primaries, now keeping his wallet shut in the general.
I mean, yes, I would agree, but it's getting to the point where is he going to spend that money on a good candidate? Like, Herschel Walker is not a great candidate.
No, he's not.
Is he the best candidate of the cycle? Perhaps.
No, the best candidate's probably still Bud or Laxalt. Walker is not an awful candidate. Walker is running a decidedly average campaign with a series of comments that are sort of vaguely not that intelligent, but not like exceedingly off-putting to voters, which is better than I can say of J.D. Vance, for example.
Right. That's kind of what I was getting at is Herschel Walker a good candidate? No, but he looks like a gold medal next to these guys.
Yeah. Again, the Blake Masters J.D. Vance thing was clearly a mistake. That's just beyond clear that what this was people who expected to have easy races in Ohio and were somehow buying into complete nonsense in Arizona.
Also, Dr. Oz.
I still think his campaign, he is not running the best campaign, but he's at least campaigning, which I cannot say of JD Vance. No, he is at least doing events. He's talking to party, like he's doing the things you would expect a candidate to do. Whereas JD Vance seems to think that the best way to campaign is to go to Israel for a couple of weeks.
Yes. No, Dr. Oz is doing what he should be doing. I just think fundamentally he's a weaker candidate than I thought.
Yeah, he's not performing about as well. But again, there's been more recent polls indicating, I think, closer to a 5 or 6 point race, which is probably closer to where it's at right now. I would give him a much better chance of winning than I'd say of Blake Masters right now. I'll tell you that. Masters is just running an abysmal campaign.
Sure, I think I would put him at I would put Oz at like a solid 45% chance right now.
Yeah, you can lead a gift, you can lead a populace to water, but you can't make them run a credible campaign. It's just laughable how bad these people are at politics.
It is.
You have Mr. spends $68 trillion or whatever in Mississippi with the Michael Guest guy. I mean, they just don't know what they're doing.
I still think it would have been really funny if he won.
It probably would have been very funny if he had won.
He seems a little more harmless than like the Laura Loomer types.
Oh, the Laura Loomers of the world. She is a lunatic. You saw the video of her crying, right? Of just yeah, it's hilarious.
That.
Also,
did somebody post that in the group chat like as it happened?
Yeah, she is just as bonkers. She claims to be the new congresswoman somehow, which is not even possible, even if she had won. It's incredible how unintelligent these people are.
It is. It really is.
It's also incredible how people are actually voting for them, which is probably more concerning.
Yeah, I mean, Laura Loomer got a solid 45%.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous, probably, that the best Republican recruit of the cycle, Joe Odea, is running in Colorado.
I mean, say what you will, at least the best Democratic recruit in 2020 was Raphael Warnock in Georgia. I mean, we may have botched a bunch of other races, but at least we got both seats in Georgia right.
And with some help from former President Trump on top of that.
Yes, we did get some help from
Trump. This is his sequence of delusional conspiracy theory nonsense.
Well, I mean, Jonathan Reitenberg says you laugh now, but Webster will retire and Loomer will win next time. Unironically, I don't think that's unlikely.
I don't think it happens because a lot of what Loomer was running specifically on was on claims of Webster being an absentee congressman, which she can easily avoid by retiring or by actually attempting to, campaign next time. Loomer is also, there's a non-zero chance Loomer ends up in jail for something. So, I mean, she's an actual lunatic.
There's a non-zero chance Vance ends up in jail for something.
For Vance? For what?
I don't know, but Vance, it wouldn't surprise me with Vance with his recent comments and associations.
He is just not a great candidate, and I try to tell people this, and they were like, "But no, he's a writer. He's a thinker. He's a thinker." Well, his thoughts are dumb, so I don't care.
Yeah, he's a thinker. Yes, he has bad thoughts. He should stop.
I'd rather a candidate have no thoughts than have bad thoughts.
Yeah, they cannot think and be better than Vance.
Yep.
But
yeah, I think
Go ahead.
It's just ridiculous how just the absolute dearth of candidate quality here.
Yeah, it's impressive. No, the entire Ohio field didn't suck. Mike Gibbons wasn't a bad candidate.
Dolan would be. Dolan wouldn't have required Republicans to spend money.
Dolan would be up by a similar margin to Mike DeWine right now.
JD Vance is the Harriet Hageman of Katie Arringtons.
Love that.
Don't remind me about her. But yeah, I think with that, we'll close off tonight's episode. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate your support. As usual, be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast. Wherever you're watching it from, our YouTube channel, Twitter, Twitch, any podcast platforms, anywhere you're listening to it. We do really appreciate you guys, all your support. We do have some interest. We have some really good stuff. I cannot say for sure if it's going to be this week, but we have some very cool stuff coming for you. So stay tuned on electionsdaily.com. We'll be updating you when it happens, but we are hoping to have something really cool for you guys this week. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, me at D Cunningham too, Dylan W. Brown. Dylan has his podcast coming up as well. Stay tuned. Be sure to like and subscribe and really, have a great night.